Another edition of Riding Home. Georgia and Kentucky, a huge matchup. The Dogs a little bit more than a 2-touchdown favorite, Ryan, over Kentucky. That line moves around a little bit. But today, Kirby Smart talking about not just the Cats, but was asked quite a bit about Auburn too. I don't know where you want to start, but we'll let you fire away here.
Yeah, let's start with just the Auburn conversation. The biggest thing today has just been a reiteration about the run game, run defense, run offense for Georgia. Hasn't been fantastic, right? It hasn't
Right.
been trash, hasn't been bad, but it's not what it's been for Georgia, and it's not up to their standard, which is elite. And we know that. Everything they want to do, everything they want to do, they want to be elite at it. And look, I can't remember the number, but Auburn had their way with Georgia in the first half running the ball,
In the first half, for
right?
sure. Yeah,
In the first half. Now, what Georgia's done every single game is improve in the second half,
correct.
and that's fine. But look, I mean, Peyton Thorne, that accounts for a lot of whatever their final number was, his big run. But off the edge, yeah, Georgia has been getting beat in the run game more this season than in previous years. But Kirby Smart said after he watched the film, it wasn't as bad as he thought originally. On the bus leaving the game, he said thinking about it made him depressed.
Well, look, the big run. So their biggest problem are turnovers. I mean, that's their number one. Their number one
Yeah.
issue. They are still net positive in the turnover game, but I don't rushing offense. They're 76th in the country, so that's not great. He said today they're still waiting to get Roderick Robinson back. They don't know. They ran one scholarship running back on Saturday because I don't think Kendall Milton had a run. Now I could be wrong
I think
about
he
that.
had one
Okay,
carry if I
you
remember correctly.
my global point is they're essentially using one scholarship running back. I mean, I'm not that old that I don't remember, you know, Zamir, James Cook, Kenny McIntosh. I mean, you'd have all those guys in the backfield at the same time. So you've got that kind of problem. That's an injury problem. As it relates to their run defense, I'm not sure that's really something to be super panicky about. Auburn was going to run the ball. That's really all they could do, Ryan. They were horrific throwing it. And I think for me, this is really, and it continues to be about, can you just not turn the ball over and go get turnovers? Because right now, in these last two games, that's been the problem more than anything.
Yeah, and the turnovers mean more now. If they're not going to have as many
Correct.
possessions as they used to, especially it seems like in the first half, they're having more of a possession issue with the clock change rules that the overall snap count's not that different, but if they're only getting 3 or 4 possessions in the first half, you turn the ball over, I mean, you're just limiting your chance to score, and that's always been the case, but now it does matter more. And look, that's not all on the offense, just not having as many possessions, and that's something that Kirby has talked about a little bit.
Yeah, the
That the defense
defense.
has
Let
got to
me
get
let me
them off
say
the field.
this. I'm
Defense
talking
has got to
over
get
you
off the
because
field.
this really has to be said. The defense is totally allowed to stop people. A, B,
Yes.
they're allowed to get turnovers. B, C, they're allowed to score. So all of those three things that have been, changing the Florida game in 21, changed clinched the Alabama national championship game in 21 later that year. All of the times what Georgia's defense did to Tennessee. Georgia's defense is not as good as it's been. I mean, I don't really know that that's really up for debate, but they're also not maybe playing the way that they can or have the capability to play. Both the offense and the defense are ranked 16th nationally in the country. That's hardly, excuse me, bad, Ryan. But both, I just think really the one thing that's been happening lately, at the beginning of the season, you had Woodring missing kicks. That was problematic. Well, that's not so much an issue right now. And now you've got from going and getting turnovers, they're not getting, they're turning it over too much. So it's been one thing or another. They're still undefeated. People are grumpy, which is their prerogative. I mean, this is not a team that's playing the way that it played last year, but it's not last year. And there's no other teams that really, I mean, I mean, Brett McMurphy's a good reporter. He's got Florida State number one. There's no scenario where Florida State's a better team right now than Georgia. They just don't look as good. Michigan's played better lately. They didn't. They played a complete game, but there's a reason why Georgia is still the number one team in the country, and there's a reason why most people are voting for them number one, whether you're talking about the coaches or the media. But that doesn't mean they're playing the way that they should be, and they've got an opportunity to do that on Saturday night against the Cats.
Yeah, look, it's a big primetime matchup. Kentucky's what? They're ranked number 20. This is a game every single year. Kirby thinks this is where they come the most banged out of. They're the most sore out of this game because it's such a physical game. They've got some players, man. That running back, Kirby said that's as good of a back as he's seen. That's high praise. Said he reminds him of a bigger DeAndre Swift. Kentucky's got professional football players. They always have. I think that the term physical and physicality gets way overused when certain things are talked about just because every game's physical, like it's football. But yeah, Kentucky is a big team. They strike well. That's another thing that they talked about today. Like, why are they so physical? It's because they strike at the line of scrimmage so well. But it's going to be a tough matchup. The environment will favor Georgia, obviously, being a home night game. I expect it to be a really good environment on Saturday, right? I mean, these Georgia fans get called out a lot. There's a lot of talk about their performance as a fan base, so I expect it to be up there
So
in terms of
listen,
environment.
Kentucky's done a really good job this season of scoring in ways that they sort of have not in the past. 44 against Ball State, 35 against Akron, 45 against Vandy, and then again 33 against Kentucky. They did not play well against Eastern Kentucky at all. That game came down to the fourth quarter. That was not, that was not a good situation for them. They were only up four midway through the fourth quarter against Eastern Kentucky. They did not play well in that game. They just didn't. But the other games they played this season, they played pretty well. Now, again, I will say as well, against Ball State, it wasn't so hot at times. They were, they were in a little bit of a tussle with them for a while, but not for long. So Kentucky's played pretty well this season. They are running the ball, obviously, pretty effectively. They are throwing it fine. But this is not an offense. Like, if you're looking at the Florida game and thinking, oh, that's the way that Kentucky is all the time, that's not the way they are all the time. They're a pretty good offense, about 400 yards a game. It's not unbelievable, but they're really good. Now, their defense is pretty good, just like Auburn's. But I have to say, and if you want to run against them, you better be ready because they are one of the best run defenses out there. But I will just say this. Now, maybe I may well be wrong here, but this is not the greatest matchup on earth for Kentucky. Georgia does exactly what Kentucky does, and typically they do it better. That's A for me. B, Ryan, Carson Beck is really starting to play well. He's not hitting 70% of his balls, but it's way up there. And
It's 72%.
Okay, there you go.
72.
Now I think against Auburn it was not. Well,
It was
might
a
have
little
been.
under 70 against Auburn, I
Yeah,
think.
but Georgia. What Georgia's missing right now, they will eventually get back, which is some healthy running backs. But I think this is not a great matchup for the Cats. I'm going to beat that drum for a while. They've not played a true road game yet. Kentucky. They played at Vanderbilt, which is not the same. And I think this is going to be a real challenge for the Cats. I've got Georgia not just winning this game, but covering it personally.
Oh, we'll sneak peek.
Yeah.
Yeah, look, I do. I've been saying a lot of teams are overrated, and I think it's just because I don't think we have enough data to rank a lot of them because of how weird of a first, now we're 5 games into it
Yeah.
for
5
most
games.
teams. Look, last week, Kentucky, they did that one thing really well, which was just run all over them. The week before that, look, it's been an inconsistent offense. This is not an offense that has shown kind of the same thing every single week. If you just go back and watch the tape, go back and look at a little bit of the numbers with Kentucky. And then the week prior at Vanderbilt, they didn't go into Vandy and blow them out. They had 2 pick sixes. It was not an amazing offensive day for the Wildcats, and they let Vanderbilt score on them in the second half. So it's going to be tough for them to go into Athens at night and compete. What's the line? 17-ish?
Well, it
Um,
was the line, just like last week, has jumped around quite a bit. It opened
yeah,
at
man.
17 and a half, went up to 18 and a half, then settled on Sunday at 16 and a half. Right now it's at 14 and a half points. So that's another reason why, I think for me, well, anyway, go ahead, Ron.
Yeah, I just think Devin Leary, like we said, Peyton Thorne didn't play phenomenally against Auburn, right? And Auburn's still in that game. There was a lot on Georgia, and there's a lot of circumstantial stuff for why that was such a close game. And part of that is Georgia just didn't play as well as they can. But to beat Georgia, you will have to have a good passing game. It's just part of it.
I
And
mean,
Devin Leary has yet to really had that signature game this season, and that's not going to be any easier at night against the Georgia secondary, against the Georgia pass defense. I just think it's going to be really tough sledding for the Wildcats in Sanford Stadium. They're the best team Georgia's played to this day. They will be. I think they're better than Auburn.
yeah. Well, we don't know.
I
I
don't know
mean,
that
I would think they're
I
better.
don't know that they're significantly better than Auburn. Auburn gave them their best so far, and that is what every team has done is
Yes.
give Georgia their best, and they fight hard. And I expect Kentucky to come in and fight, but you can't just run all over Georgia and that be it.
No, they're going to have to do so. Another thing that concerns me for Kentucky, um, is that they're averaging 7 penalties a game. Um,
You're gonna get a few false starts when
well,
it's loud in there. So
so that's more than the Gators. Um, and you're not seeing a lot of undefeated teams. There's some Oregon, down at the bottom here with these penalties. USC, who just seems not. I mean, they seem like kind of wild at times. Georgia, on the other hand, and we saw the other day, Georgia just does not get penalized a lot. They're averaging about 4 a game. How many of those are in real time? I don't know. So that's 17th best in the country. Kentucky's at 94th. So that's a problem when you're playing on the road. I think that's a problem. I've got the DoorDash up. I didn't mean to do that. I must have knocked you off the screen, Ryan. But let me tell everybody about our offer from DoorDash. It is that time of year. We may do this. We may do this when we get to Nashville for the Georgia game. Make sure that you're getting 50% off your $10 value when you spend $15 or more on your first order when you download the DoorDash app and enter the code DAWG DAWG football. Uh, it, Enter the code Dog Football, subject to change and terms apply. All sorts of stuff that they've got at DoorDash. Make sure that you're taking advantage of that while you can. It's not going to be an offer we have forever or at all times, I should say. But Ryan, let me get you back on the screen. I don't know what I did there. I've got some gremlins in the office here. I think it's going to be a tough matchup for Kentucky. What's some other stuff that Kirby Smart had to say today about this matchup? I know he gets grumpy about talking about the last game, but I get grumpy. I get grumpy
this is
about
the
things too.
least this is the least that the opponent was discussed. There was a lot of things going on today. Um, there was a lot of retrospect today in looking back at Auburn. It was an uncommon Monday press conference in that regard because really the key points was just about their star players and about the physicality in the running game. But as far as this was an atypical Monday where the opponent was not discussed very much. And part of that was because of um, Mark Richt coming in and talking about the
Right.
fundraiser, which we hadn't talked about, but um, abnormal Monday press conference.
What do you think? You've watched Kentucky. I think some. I don't know if you watched them a lot. We had them on a couple Saturdays ago against Vanderbilt, which you know and then we watched a lot of their game against Florida because we were sitting there in the Auburn press box. And there wasn't anything else on except that game. What's your concern for Devin Leary when he gets to Athens, the Kentucky quarterback?
Just playing against better football players, man. I mean,
Yeah,
I think that as much as Georgia's defense kind of gave up some big chunk plays, and we could talk about like it was maybe poor run defense. I do think that both sides of the ball have, whether it's been a great improvement or a slight improvement, I think that they have improved as the year has gone on, and you can see it slowly coming together and slowly coming together. And I think Georgia will eventually put together a pretty complete game where they, knock a good opponent out. That might come this week against Kentucky.
It
Maybe it's
could.
a little soon, but if you're Devin Leary, I mean, he just hasn't played guys like this. Malachi Starks, Smile London, players like that. He's never had to face people like that outside of, I guess, Clemson in his career. I mean, just straight up, he's never played against players like that.
No, and the other thing too, going back to a lot of the discussion, Auburn had 8 big plays against Georgia. 7 of them were in the run game. That's more, Ryan, than Georgia's given up in the run this season. So in one,
Yeah, so explosives is something Kirby has talked about as a bigger indicator than turnovers for how you win a game. That's something he said last year, and I remember he brought that up recently as well. So for Kentucky to beat Georgia, and it's the same thing we talked about a week ago. What does Auburn need to do? They need, one, win the turnover route. They did. Two, maybe win the explosive play battle. I think they did that too. Still
they did
lost.
not. So
Did they
let's just
not
talk.
win the explosive play battle?
So they did not, according to Georgia. I don't know what
Okay.
I don't I don't know what if Kirby and them keep different statistics in the sports information department. But let's talk about just one real quick. Let the audience stick with us just for a second here. Um, you know, after the game, I got confused, and Chris Doring got confused this morning. By the way,
Oh, really?
the same way I did. Um, I was saying to Kirby that they had turned it over 3 times, which they had not. Okay, they'd only turned it over twice. It felt like they turned it over 3 times. But with that said, Chris Doring said the same thing this morning. With that said, Auburn had not just the turnovers, but the explosive plays both, and they still lost the game. Georgia has not been out exploded this season. They have been tied on that front, which was against South Carolina, and they lost that game, South Carolina. So Georgia's given up 4, 3, 8, 7, and 8 explosive plays. In the previous 4 games, they'd given up 5 total explosive plays. So that's a 12-yard run or more. Against Auburn, they'd given up 7 in one game. Georgia's offense has been painfully consistent, Ryan, actually, in terms of the explosive plays. They've gone 15, 12, 8, and then 12 and 12. So against South Carolina, they matched Carolina with 8 and 8 in terms of explosiveness. You would think that Georgia would not quite be having as many explosive runs, and they haven't. Against UT Martin, 12 passing plays that are explosive, 8 against Ball State, only 3 against Carolina, then 9 against UAB, and of course 8 against Auburn. But they are out exploding their opponent. I'm making that word up, and that's what's happening is Georgia's actually very efficient on offense, but my only sort of complaint, I'm sure Kirby would agree, is if you continue to make mistakes turning the ball over, A, then that's going to lead to a loss. B, and this has not happened lately, but if you miss easy field goals, that's another way to lose. So I understand the grumpiness from Georgia folks. Don't you?
Yeah, no, I get it.
I mean, but it's not cost them yet. I don't know if, and if they continue to play that way, people say, oh, we'll get them. I mean, maybe. It might not. I mean, I don't know.
They're turning. I hate doing this, but it's just what it is. Alabama for a decade just felt like they find a way to win these games. Their DNA is winning. Their default is winning. Feels like that's what we're watching with Georgia at least to an extent now. I mean, you could pick apart Missouri last year is very comparable to the way South Carolina felt this year, and Auburn. I mean, Auburn more so on the road down in the
Yeah, I
second
mean,
half.
but there were, the Mississippi State game last year, way closer at the half than it could have been or should have been. Way closer. Kentucky last year. How
Wacky
miserable.
special teams play in that Mississippi State game
Really
too. I think
bad.
it was a
Yeah.
punt return.
Well, and the turn and I keep talking about turnovers. I have to say that two of the turnovers were on special teams against UAB, were they not? So, and
Think
one
so.
and so
One
one
for
of them was
sure.
definitely Muse, and I think the other one was I'm gonna say Ron Thomas, but I could be wrong about that. But someone turned it over just before the half. But anyway, and then you had the Gunnar Stockton one, and you had Oscar Delp against Auburn opening, and they were moving the ball. Oscar Delp, and they were certainly moving the ball at midfield, more so than the Oscar Delp. Moving the ball, they were at midfield when about said Stetson when Carson Beck threw that interception. I mean, it was just a bad throw. The kid from Auburn made a good play, but it was just not the right throw. But the guy, he's at 69.4% for the season. He's played really well, and he's going to have to play well against Kentucky. Georgia is not playing as poorly, I think, as some people are thinking they are. But I also think it's two things at once. It's that, but it's also accurate that they're not playing as well as they're being expected to play. And that is a they can't really control. Well, they can control that to play better, Ryan, but they can't necessarily control how people think.
Yeah, but the expectation isn't reality. It just
No,
isn't.
no.
And they're expected to go in there and just dominate everybody, and that has never been true. First of all, it just hasn't. They haven't 29 games
Well,
from 21 and
They
22. They didn't
dominated
dominate
TCU.
29 games.
They dominated TCU, South Carolina, and Oregon last year. That's who they absolutely blitzed. LSU to some degree. Other than that, the games were not. I mean, Georgia Tech.
It's because the expectation is higher. It's higher than it was the last 2 years. And it shouldn't be. It shouldn't be. It should be reset for a new season with new circumstances, different players. The possession thing in the first half is weird.
Well,
It's just it's bizarre, and it's part on Georgia to just the first half has to get better because you don't want to have to claw a bunch. You don't want to have to keep clawing. That gets exhausting.
however,
However,
however, and this is as an old tennis player. The first set's just the first set. Like you got to win 2 out of 3, and so just because you win the first one does not necessarily mean you're going to win the second one. The first half is not always indicative of the second. Not always. A lot of times it is, but not always. And we've seen Georgia in second halves this season destroy people. Now, why is that? Well, I wonder. I don't know. My suspicion is they have a lot of really good players that after a while Auburn looks exhausted. Now, Auburn did not look exhausted the other day, Ryan, but they had earned 14 points off of turnovers from Georgia. It's a lot easier to play in that scenario, and that they're playing Welcome to the Jungle, and they're doing the ridiculous targeting hit on Aaron Murray over and over again. You can hype people up like that when you already have taken the 14 points. If that's a field goal or 2 field goals or even just 10 points, and Georgia goes up 10 at the end of the game, not just 7, it's all these little things that are adding up or against Georgia. Right now, if they go in, I'll tell you right now, I could be completely wrong. If Georgia goes and plays Kentucky and does not turn the ball over, they are not going to lose. That would be what I would say to everybody right now. They're just not going to lose. The problem is they have been turning it over lately. I don't know. I watched the Florida game. I don't recall any turnovers with Kentucky and Florida. Kentucky was just better than Florida, period. And so we're going to see on Saturday. And if Georgia wins, that doesn't mean that they've figured everything out. And if they lose, it doesn't mean the race to the division is over. It's just a moment in time. And Kirby keeps talking about, I'm talking about moment in time forever, Brian, but he keeps talking about winning the moment. And I agree with you. It would be easier to get up, say, 17-3 on Kentucky before you go into the half. But they haven't been up. I don't think they've been up at the half significant on anybody this year. Not
just only Ball State. Only
was
Ball
it Ball
State.
State? Okay, yeah. That's it.
That was when they had the second quarter explosion. But
I mean,
that was it.
even against UAB, they were firmly in control, but they were only up two touchdowns, I think it was. And why?
Yeah.
Why? Because they got a turnover at the 20 and turned it into 7 points.
And that is a big part of the difference. How good Georgia's defense has been in years past. It's just not as good.
No,
and
it's
it's
not. But
fine. It's just they're just not as good.
they're not as
I think
good.
it's
But
yeah,
they're not as good. But they should be playing a little bit better than they're playing right now.
yeah.
Yeah. Listen, I'm not a hot take guy. But I'll tell you right now, all you guys want to talk about is how elite you are and what the standard is. Well, you're not hitting it, and you ain't elite right now. So you have the capability of being that, but that's not what's happening right now. Now, I'm sure that Kirby and them are screaming that at them or saying that to them, but it's just the truth. They have an opportunity this week, though, to reset that, and we'll just see what happens. Final thoughts on Kirby today?
Calm, calm.
Oh,
He's been a little bit too calm. He's not acting himself.
oh boy. All right, well, we'll see y'all in the next video. Thanks for watching.